village over to wherever your student is going to be going to middle school. So we wanted to invite our principal team here to be able to answer some of those questions and give us a little bit of sense of what middle school is going to be like for our village wolves when they get there in a few short months. So thank you for being here. And other questions can also be put into the chat as well. If you prefer not to turn your microphone off, that's fine too. And as people join in, I'll just kind of keep reminding everyone of that in the chat, just so I don't have to interrupt our middle school folks from speaking. I'll just say the same thing in the chat. So you'll see that. So thank you, Raj, for organizing this for us. And thank you, middle school admin, for joining us.
Sure, thank you so much. Yeah. We can get started. Yeah, I've started the recording now. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so what we could do is we could open this first up to, if this is okay with our middle school admin, we can open it up to some questions that the parents and caregivers on this call might have. And then we can sort of take it from there. I'm sure that it will sort of blend into some organic conversations about middle school and the transition for our kids into middle school. So anyone is welcome to turn their camera on or not. And turn their microphone off and ask any questions that you may have, or you can type them into the chat if that's more comfortable for you.
Hi, I have a daughter at Grover right now, and we love Grover. And I actually have a fourth grader right now, so we have one more year to go. But I was just curious, given the pandemic and how the world has changed, how is the transition looking for fifth graders going into CMS or GMS, given just the current environment and the way things are? Because I know it's certainly different from when it was when my older one transitioned to middle school. So I was just curious if things have changed. Is it the same? Just wanted to know.
Hello. Well, I think we're getting closer to what you would define as the same as when your older child got to Grover. If you were to ask that question, of course, in the beginning of the school year, we would probably have a different answer. And we very well may have a different answer as we proceed to transition our current fifth graders into sixth grade in September. But currently, we are definitely have transitioned to what we could, quote unquote, define as normal. You know, the social distancing is not there as much as it was. The masking is not there as much as it was. The temperature scans is not there as much as it was. The having teachers to sort of go back and check which kids would sit next to which kid if someone got sick, that's not there anymore. And so we're trying our best to make it as normal as possible. I know at Grover, and your child could speak to this, at the beginning of the year, we had single desks for lunch where the kids just sat at their one desk at lunch where they were, 3 feet apart from other kids. Now they're back to the circle tables and eating lunch with one another. So we have been trying our very best to get back to a sense of normalcy for the building, and that's the structure component. There's definitely a social piece for all students, as you probably experienced this year with both of your students, both of your kids, and the ones who are in middle school and the one that's at Village. It was definitely a hard transition for most of our kids coming back to in-person instruction and interacting literally with other kids. Some of them, the social cues that they were used to or that they would have learned, they did not pick up because many of them were behind screens. So at the middle level and probably even at the upper elementary, we have been trying our best to work on getting the students to learn or relearn how to interact with people in person, and what's appropriate to say, what's not appropriate to say, what's appropriate to do, what's not appropriate to do. The hope is within the next 6 to 8 months, once the kids are back, we'll get quote unquote back to complete normalcy. But that's definitely has been a goal. Hopefully this will be sort of behind us and we won't ever talk about this except for in our old age when we say, do you remember when we had to deal with COVID? But that's sort of it in a nutshell. I don't know if others want to add in.
No, Lamont, I think that's perfect. I would agree. I think that, listen, there's been an adjustment period. I think we're still in that adjustment period, but I do think, we've been in it together. The transition from fifth to sixth, with those exceptions, hasn't changed all that much, right? It is still the transition from elementary school to the secondary level, more responsibility, more freedoms, using lockers, changing classes, letter grades, all of those kinds of things, that we've become used to, we are still used to, and our staff are still well prepared to, help our students make those transitions. So yes, I would agree. And then echo that, the things that have always been there, regardless of COVID, are still there. And we're still ready to, take our upper elementary students and bring them into our middle schools and make them feel a part of that and kind of get them started with that next step in their educational career.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Yeah, hi. So I have a question. So I have twin boys in 5th grade. They will enter community middle school, and so they're excited, but they're also trying to figure out. Now they had like homeroom. How do they go from homeroom to the new setup? So like, how do you guys prepare them? What's like the usual process that they go through in like the initial few days?
Great. Well, we look forward to having your children at community, becoming a part of our team, becoming Panthers. I think that's great. They should be excited. We are excited to have them. We'll have opportunities over the summer, including an open house. Both schools will have one where our 6th grade students will certainly be able to at least get the lay of the land a little bit and get to understand kind of what the building looks like, community especially, but Grover as well. We're growing, so there is certainly more to learn. But again, I think in addition to that opportunity, which some students are able to be there and some are not, the 6th grade staff especially, and I'm probably speaking for both schools here, are adept at understanding that they don't know their schedule. They don't know the timing of these things. You'll have all of that information, right? All of that will be available to you as a family. Students will have their schedules. Things will be in Genesis. They'll get to meet their teachers, but trust, it takes just a couple of short weeks usually for everyone to feel very, very comfortable and really know their schedule better than you will, to understand the building more than sometimes we do, and to kind of keep us on our toes. But our staff are ready to go. Those first few days especially, they're touring the buildings, they're doing team building activities, they're just getting to kind of dip the toe in the water, so to speak. And so I think probably our assistant principals, if they've got things to add, they know what it's like, to bring in those students as well. But trust, we're ready, and it is an exciting time for everybody. But yeah, we know that there comes some anxiety with the transition, and that's totally normal. And we're ready to take that on with our kids too, and equip them to feel more than comfortable at either school.
While we're waiting, just to we've got principals of 3 schools here. The WWP Strongwear will be delivered by tomorrow or Monday to all schools. So just to let you know that if anybody's asking or waiting for them, it's coming.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Maya. We really appreciate all your help with that.
She's
Oh,
repping
the amazing thing is
WWP.
it became a win-win-win because we didn't realize we were going to sell so much. We could have actually reduced the price, but hindsight's always 20/20. But the Education Foundation is now going to get like a $1,700 check. And the Education Foundation gives grants to the teachers. So it's kind of like a win-win-win. So.
Way around. All
So
right,
we
are we all
have,
back?
We have about 16 participants total. Is that about how many we had before it cut out?
I think we had a few more than that, just based on how many rows I had on my.
Yeah, we had I think like 18 or
Zoom
something.
screen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we
Why
can
don't
get
we-
started again though, Mr. Tolt.
Yeah, so just to explain, sorry about that, everybody. I was switching from my phone device to my computer and I clicked the end for all instead of just end me button. So I ended up kicking everybody off. So I will take responsibility for that. And as Mr. Malakaitis, our assistant principal from Grover, pointed out, what a perfect opportunity to model the flexibility that is so important in working with middle school students. So kind of take that as a microcosm of what it might feel like for students as they navigate their way through the first few days of 6th grade, not knowing really anything about their school or their schedule, and how, middle school staff are very adept at sort of adjusting and being flexible too. So I thank you all for that. I apologize, but we are back on track now. So why don't we just, now the recording has restarted, why don't we just restate what the last question was and continue with the answering that was happening.
I think the PTSA president at Village was asking a question about his two students and the transition to middle school. Oops, there he goes.
Yes, transition to the middle school. Yeah.
Yeah, and especially in those, and as Mr. Schimpf said too, in a few short weeks, kids figure out very much what it's like being in a middle school, what it's like having a homeroom, and not just staying with the same group of kids and the same teacher all day for the most part, but having different teachers for all of your classes and moving around a building where there are roughly 1,200 other kids. But I want to say too, something that is very helpful as someone who came from an elementary teaching position at Millstone River School to being an administrator here at Grover. Our teachers really do prioritize making connections with kids, helping kids, and empathizing with kids as they transition to this brave new world of middle school. And so there is really heavy on the front end of really building social emotional connections and a community, not just in your classroom, but in your team, which is, I know Mr. Thomas and Ms. Kiak will agree, and everybody here, the team component of middle school is such a powerful piece and something that leads to great memories, friendships, and lessons learned too. So, the teachers, it's not lost on the teachers that these kids are coming from very different environments, and getting them prepared for what it takes, not just to navigate a school, but to navigate life as a middle schooler is something we all prioritize, and is a big part of their first, say month in a new school.
What I was going to say, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Sonia.
Mr. Tom. And just to piggyback on what Evan has said, really the beauty of teaming in middle schools takes two very large middle schools and takes the 1,200 students that we're talking of and really makes it more of 100 students that your child will be interacting with. So it feels as if you have 4 smaller 6th grade schools within the school. And that, when you think of that, you think, oh, well, my child's around 100 other people. They have the same teachers. Their lockers are in the same area. They're all going through the same type of getting to know you activities and the same adjustments. It really does make the transition a lot easier. Not just that, but it makes the relationship building that much stronger, to the point at which students sometimes, find hidden gems of friends that they would never have discovered otherwise. So I think that's one of the benefits during our early days as we're transitioning in both buildings, at CMS and at GMS.
Yeah, what I was going to say along those lines, parents, if you go back and just look at some of the videos that we put together for our parent orientation, we speak to and define what the team looks like for you. So you could go back and say, what does this team actually look like? And what does that mean for the middle level? But more importantly, if you want to be informed, but also entertained at the same time, go back and listen to the students who were sitting where our current 5th graders are sitting now, who are currently 6th graders. So they go back, those current 6th graders go back and talk about their experience in that transition and what it meant for them. So you get it from the mouth of the student, not just for the adults who sort of live and breathe this each and every day. So it's important just to go back and listen to the students. The other piece I was going to say is, I think I used this example last year, Mr. Topa and others who may have been on the line, is you just sort of think of middle school as almost that student who's going to become a butterfly and that transformation that's going to occur. So in 6th grade, to answer the question directly, we do cocoon, like as a cocoon, the kids in a little bit more and sort of keep them together, and the team does a great job. And then little by little, we release them, and then they become these butterflies in 8th grade. So just think they're caterpillars now, but by the time they get through and the work that we're going to do with them and work with them, they will have their wings to soar in 8th grade. So it'll be a little bit more restrictive in 6th grade because that's where they are, but we hope that they are able to be free and be able to articulate their thoughts and let us know what's on their mind by 8th grade. So it is a safe environment in 6th grade at both middle schools because the structures are in place, and we definitely understand where they're coming from a room of 25 to a building of 1,200, but they will be able to navigate it. But do yourself a favor, if you have not done so, go back and just listen to the kids and their presentation and what their experience was like transitioning from upper elementary to middle school.
Eric Carl would be proud of that analogy, Mr. Thomas. I'll drop in actually the link to the space where you can find all of the information, the transition information from 5th to 6th. Everything is posted through the district website, so I can drop that in the chat as well.
I had two questions. One is are textbooks ever coming back, and what consideration should we take with book bags for our kids? Because I will now have coming in a 6th grader in CMS and an 8th grader in CMS who's already in CMS right now. He was in Grover last year, but we moved. He often says that he doesn't feel like he has time to go between to his locker. Cause I always ask him, cause initially over the summer, our biggest stress was, oh my God, the locker, get a lock and figure out how to unlock it. And he's like, I never use it because I don't have time. But I remember when I was in school, we had textbooks and things like that. So what should parents take into consideration with book bags for the kids to make them comfortable? Are they allowed to carry them around? I'll ask my second question later. I'll let you answer that one.
I'll start with the first one. Everyone's assigned a locker. We encourage the use of that locker. We spend time showing students where they are and how to use them. And we work with our staff to make sure that kids are evaluating their schedules against those lockers to figure out like, hey, when do I visit and when do I not? We don't want everyone carrying their life around with them through the 8 hours that they're with us. It's not necessary. We are working as we build our schedules and things of that nature to try to, think through proximity, make sure that at CMS especially, we're going to be somewhat out of the woods when it comes to construction and hallways that have been shut down and things of that nature. We should be able to facilitate those things. I think the other component of this, and we're in the, and thank you, Mr. Tolt, for posting that in the chat. We are also in the midst of reviewing the supply lists that will be provided for you to kind of get students, set up with materials. Because we are one-to-one, because a number of the resources can be accessed through district Chromebooks, there is not a ton of textbook carrying that is needed. A lot of those resources will either remain in the room or the students then have access through other means when they're at home with you. But I would also say that doesn't mean that they're not going to have binders. It doesn't mean that they won't have writers' notebooks, because there is part of the art and the beauty of being back in person is that we don't have to sit in front of the screens always, right? It's a good resource and a tool, but it is not the only way to access those things. So I think families make their kind of individual decisions on some of those things, and so do students, but we really do highly encourage them to use their lockers, structure their day accordingly. You're right, 3 minutes is not a lot of time. Even if we made it 4 minutes, it's not a lot of time, but we can tell you from being in those halls that they can also use that time a little bit better to get from place to place. So there is that component of it too, but I'll leave that to I'll leave the rest to my panelists here on that too.
Yeah, and for what we have done at Grover, we try our very best when we assign the students their locker. It's normally right around their team classes. And so the team classes, if you say the 4 core classes are next door to one another, so if they're moving from one class next door to the other in reference to like the time that it takes, all of 10 seconds, really, it should take. And if they need to go to their locker is right there. It's one thing they have to go to gym or they have to go to the cafeteria or one of the elective classes, but we're very mindful of those 4 core classes. That's a team. So those teachers are within close proximity of one another, and the child's locker is assigned to them in that proximity. So yes, with the book bags, we try to discourage as much as possible because the room sizes are not that great, and if many of our kids are trying to carry everything with them, so you're thinking about 25 bags with all this stuff in it, and it does become a tripping hazard.
Just something to add in that just made me think of it when you mentioned the proximity of rooms and things. For those of you on the call who don't know, before I was an assistant principal or a principal, I was a middle school teacher for 11 years over at Community Middle School. And then I was an assistant principal at Community for 3 years. So I had spent 14 years there getting to know middle school really well. And one thing that was always on the kids' minds coming into middle school, and probably also their families, was they used to panic about, will I have enough time to get to my classes? Like this idea of changing classes without being escorted by a teacher like you are in elementary school is a new idea, a new concept for them. And one thing I like to share with the kids, and I'll share with you as well, is I share with them that it was actually scientifically proven by students conducting an experiment for one of their science classes. The question they were investigating is there enough time? Is the passing time that they give us enough to get to our classes on time? And they determined through the scientific method that it is absolutely enough time, even if you're going from like the gym to a really far away classroom, that it is enough time as long as you just kind of make your way directly there. You know, you can talk with your friends and everything, but if you're stopping along the way or taking detours, that's when it becomes a problem. So for the most part, there's nothing to worry about in terms of getting where they need to go. And in fact, now that the schools have been expanded, there's less traffic in the hallways, I would imagine, and they're able to get there on time. So if your children are worried about that, you can certainly allay their fears a little bit that they have plenty of time to get there, based on the way the classrooms are set up, the way their lockers work, and what is actually required of them to carry around with them.
There is the scenic route, and then there is point A to point B. So I think it's the advice that we give our students and the recommendations to them.
And then Maya, I think you had a second question that you wanted to ask as well.
Yeah, actually, Vina posted a question. It piggybacks a little bit off of it. When my older one went into 6th grade, he had a lot of anxiety about the grades, and he used to compulsively check Genesis like 20 times in a day. Like he would come home and be like, at 6, did they post it? Did they post it? Did they post it? Does the do the guidance counselors do any kind of guidance for the kids in telling, like, just helping them just deal with this new situation of getting grades and the anxiety of it, and maybe not check it as often because it is what it is, but like that.
Yeah, I think it's not just school counselors or case managers. I think it's the teachers themselves as well, right? Our teachers know that our students coming from our pre-K 5 program have not received letter grades, right? It's been a little bit different. And then you hit the secondary level, and 6th grade is that opportunity to have that first taste of what is it to submit work on time, submit good work, submit my work, understand feedback, understand how grades relate to some of that feedback, how to ask for help. All of those things are going to be part of the learning process. To kind of, I think, borrow from Mr. Thomas's analogy, there are certainly bumps in the road, right? I think that there is a balance to be met. There is no reason for a child to be checking Genesis that often. Teachers are good and will grade as quickly as they can to get that feedback into Genesis, but they're not that good. So if they take a test, I've seen it, they take a test and in the next class, they're in Genesis trying to see if there's a score. Not necessary. So yeah, we're well aware of that component. Our counselors do programs and push into classes pretty quickly into the year to kind of just, again, talk through their academic experiences, how they prepare themselves, how they stay organized, how they can do those things. And I think all of it is just continuously reinforced, not just in the 6th grade year, right, throughout the middle school career, right? Because it's just another way of tracking your own progress, of celebrating your successes, and a lot of times, right, learning from our failures, learning from the times that we've made mistakes or whatever the case may be. I'll touch the homework piece and then I'll stop and let anybody else chime in. We do have a homework policy, right? The district does. We do try our very best, I think, and especially over the last few years, and especially with slightly different approaches, there is not an overwhelming amount of homework that goes home. The homework that goes home is deemed intentional for that purpose, so that a student can either get reinforcement of practice or can be doing something exploratory before their next class, right? Something that gears them up for whatever that next experience is going to be. Typically, I would say there's those like 10 minutes a class type or 10 minutes per grade level type of thing. So if your child is spending more than, let's say, 60 to 90 minutes on homework every night, then I'd encourage you to reach out to your schools, whether it's the teacher, counselor, case manager, administration, whatever the case may be, because we'd want to dig into that, because that's relatively atypical. Obviously, there are some areas where homework is a little more consistent than in others. I used to teach 6th grade social studies. I did not give a ton of homework, but 6th grade math colleagues gave more homework because, again, that subject lends itself to a little bit more of that repeated practice and whatever the case may be. So it does vary somewhat here to there, but all of our teachers are aware of our policies and follow through with that, and are also willing and able to work with families and students who may find themselves struggling with time management or spending too much time on homework.
In the school counselors, they do have groups that they do, counseling sessions for a litany of things, including anxiety and stress like that. Once the students are identified, they do meet with those small groups to sort of give them a skill set that will help them move forward. But the other point at the middle level philosophy is that this is the time that students could make mistakes. Like I sort of said earlier, this is the time where we encourage them to make mistakes and to venture out and try different things, because unlike high school, it's not a credit that's associated with the coursework. There's no official transcript that they would get. They could make mistakes and rebound. That's not a problem. It's not compounded. Like, okay, they got a low grade, and at the end of their high school career, they're going to get, or middle level career, they're going to have a GPA. So we encourage the students to go ahead and make mistakes and to take chances. And so we try our best to get parents to understand that too, as far as the middle level. This is the time, because yes, high school is a little different. You get credits and you get a GPA and you're looking at colleges, but for the middle level, that's not the case. We're given skills and they're learning skills, but it's not a time to be stressed out by grades.
If I could just jump in, and after Mr. Schimpf and Mr. Thomas, the idea of school counselors came up a few different times. In addition to helping kids certainly work through things that pop up, I want to just sort of give a shout out and hopefully encourage all parents who you have outreach to prioritize and encourage your students to develop relationships with their school counselors, and to try to fight if there does exist a stigma where people think that you only speak to a school counselor if you have a problem. I think that the relationship, and we say it all the time, we really hope that kids develop relationships with at very minimum one trusted adult in the building, but obviously hopefully more than that. But your school counselors are such valuable resources who also travel with your children throughout their middle school career. So is a great asset and resource in their middle school experience, and I encourage everybody to develop relationships.
One thing that I would add, as I'm hearing some of the questions, like there are questions that as parents you have, but also that students have. Some folks mentioned their children being, concerned about homework or confused about certain things. Something to encourage your kids to do while they're still at Village is we don't have a date yet, but I know our 5th grade teachers are currently working with the staff over at Grover to have middle school students come over here sometime in between May and June. We do it every year where some of the students from the middle school come over here physically to Village, and they meet with every class, and they have an opportunity to do kind of a Q&A like this, but from kid to kid. And as everyone on this phone call and on this Zoom call knows, what they hear from other students often carries a whole different kind of weight than what they hear from us and from you. Of course, we know we are powerful influences on them, but they do definitely listen to their peers in a different way. So if they're having questions, or if they're starting to think about middle school, encourage them to just kind of keep track, jot them down, because they're going to have an opportunity.
Hey, Sandy, how you doing? You got the link, right? You got the link?
For the end of this school year to actually talk with some middle school students kind of live and in person. And that's always a helpful experience. Just a quick introduction, Mr. Hamnett, Paul Hamnett just joined us. He's one of the assistant principals over at Community Middle School, along with Sonia Singh and Kyle Schimpf that have been on the call with us. And just to make sure we're all clear, Mr. Evan Malakaitis is one of the assistant principals at Grover, and Lamont Thomas is the principal at Grover, and Kim Kiak is the other assistant principal at Grover as well. So thank you to all 6 of you for joining us today.
Keep the questions coming. Good job.
I have a question, and thank you for all the wonderful information that you all are sharing. I have a son coming into Grover for 6th grade. 5th grade has been interesting, 4th grade even more so, but it's as we've all navigated, for me, it's been a little bit, I found my kids adjusting very well to the school, so I've been able to be a little handoffish in the sense that I don't have to be very micromanaging how they're doing with their school and everything, and everything's worked great. My son's doing amazing. But in terms of that, with the middle school, maybe from the educators, but also from parents, what is the expectation from parents, and how does it change between elementary and middle as we help and support our kids through 6th grade?
That's a good question. And whenever questions like that are raised, it's normally like when I have the 6th grade parents in front of me and they ask that question, I'm like, well, I don't know because I'm not at the elementary level. So I'm not sure what you do down there compared to what my parents do here. But as a parent who currently has a 6th grader and an 8th grader, I, like you just said, more and more, I'm completely hands off. The question I only ask, do you have homework? Did you get it done? Do you need any help? And that's for both my current 6th grader and my 8th grader. And sometimes they do need my help and I assist them with their homework, but for the most part, they do not. We have Genesis too. I take a look every so often at Genesis and things are looking fine. And that's sort of where you want to be. You want eventually to have your child become independent as much as possible, but also know that if they need you, they get to rely on you versus just being sort of on top of them all the time, because that can be that added stress that you don't think you're adding to them, but you may be doing so. So if you know your child has the ability to be independent and to get things done, then just be a little less hands-on if possible, to be a little more hands-off. But if you think you need to engage and help out, by all means, do so. If they were able to transition at the upper elementary, then they should be able to transition. Sounds like your kid's going to be okay at the middle level. But at that first couple of weeks when they transition 6th grade, just check in and see.
Yeah, as somebody who's in the same boat as Lamont, I have an 8th grader and a 7th grader, so I can speak from that parent perspective. And the use of just kind of checking up, through Genesis. My school doesn't use that, but I use something similar. When I see an assignment that they didn't hand in, I breathe. I don't freak out. I just politely ask, and of course they tell me, "Oh, it's not due yet. The teacher put it in. I don't know why." Now you have evidence that I definitely have a 14-year-old. But and just to kind of talk through them with stuff, I've also had to make sure my kids go to bed on time, because sometimes there is added homework in a middle school over what was expected in an elementary school. So I've had to say, put the book away, get your sleep. It's more important. Send the teacher an email that you weren't able to accomplish it because my kids are doing different activities, and kind of giving them space, as Lamont said, not overreacting to a grade or a missed assignment or something like that, but yet letting them know I'm watching, but not too hard. It's a fine line, but you'll find your way as they're going to find their way.
Something Mr. Hamnet just said that I think is a perfect and critically important point is when he said, send your teacher an email. Right. I think when kids go from elementary to middle school, and as they go from middle to high school, as anybody has high school kids here too, that increased necessity for kids to advocate for themselves and to up the communication. Right. If we have, in middle school, we practice modeling that behavior for them a lot too. And at elementary school, you might reach out to a teacher and say, this happened, but they weren't able to do this or that. In middle school, this is where they're practicing how to reach out on their own behalf and to sort of advocate for their own needs. So it is the upping the communication is an important piece and something that is a manageable addition to their sort of responsibility and their plates.
The only thing I'll add is just trust too, we will be in touch, right? If there are needs that arise or things that, good or bad, things to celebrate and or things that we need to work through together, right? School and home, we do those things, right? Every staff member on this call right now has had multiple email conversations and phone calls with families throughout the day already. It's what we do day in and day out. We work with you. Same thing with teachers, same thing with counselors. It is a little bit different. I'll just touch base in terms of, okay, so I'm a parent, what else can I do? Through our PTSAs, SEPTA, AAPSG, those kinds of parent organizations, there's often opportunities to volunteer for you to get involved. Obviously, as we move back into kind of normalcy with some of those things, those continue to be the case as well. We also will have a back to school night program of some form or fashion in September. So it's another opportunity for you to be meeting teachers, to hear what our expectations are, to understand the content and skills that are going to be explored year after year. How do you get in touch? What are those things? So you're going to learn also, right, the kind of guardrails that are up for you and for your children as they come into the middle school. The thing that will be a little bit different is we do have 2 rounds of parent-teacher conferences in the fall and in the very early spring. And unlike at the elementary level where our teachers will meet with virtually everybody, our teachers will schedule their teacher initiated conferences. So there is going to be that transition for parents where you will not necessarily be getting, other than what you see in Genesis or whatever teachers are doing for their own individual classrooms, you're not necessarily going to be getting the carve out 15, 20 minutes if your child is doing very well. Right. It's a little bit more of the no news is good news, and that's okay. I just want to kind of add that component of it, that you can get involved. You will hear from us. We will partner with you. But there are sometimes also those times where children are doing well. We keep moving, right? We move right along. We keep growing along with them. So it's not a bad thing if you're not hearing from us.
And the only other thing I'll add to what Mr. Schimpf said is, as I was transitioning as a parent from elementary to middle and then middle to high school with my boys, it was really what are the protocols that we follow? And so as we're encouraging our children to reach out, if we need as parents to provide that support, I would start with the classroom teacher and then move towards the guidance counselor if there's something more general that's a concern, an academic concern. And then always you can reach out to the grade level assistant principals. That's usually the protocol that has been followed in my children's school, and that's the one we follow here at Community Middle School as well. We're always willing to help. It's just that the teachers will know the most specifics about those classes first and foremost, and the guidance counselors are very focused on supporting students academically and emotionally, and connect with teams of teachers all the time. And so they are always having conversations. They would be the next step to being able to get the most bang for your buck, the most amount of support for a quick email or for a quick phone conversation. So as you're starting to navigate from one main homeroom teacher to several, that would really be the pathway.
Got it. Thank you.
I would, to that same point about, kind of the role of the parent and how does it differ at that level. One thing to just kind of put out there for those of you who, if this might be your first time through middle school, it's natural and typical and to be expected that your kids are going to kind of sort of withdraw a little bit from you in terms of maybe how much they share about their day or tell you about themselves and their lives and what's going on. That's normal, but it doesn't mean you're no longer allowed to ask and probe. It might not feel cool to them to come home and tell you everything about their day,
oriented.
but they do crave that. It's in there, and they do want to know that their parents care and are interested in what's going on with them. So I recommend fighting the urge to honor that withdrawal totally. Like, you want to respect it and obviously give them their space and help them grow. But at the same time, they might not admit it, but they will notice if their parents don't seem as interested anymore. Even if they're conveying that they don't want to talk to you about it, you're still their parent, and they want to know that you're still there for them. So it's going to be hard to experience that, where all of a sudden your kids don't seem as open anymore, but that's developmentally appropriate. It's what they do. They're craving independence. They're craving, they want to feel mature, even if they're not totally there yet. But as their mom, as their dad, as their family, certainly feel free to, probe about their day, but it might just look a little different. And maybe that's really some really good, when you do have an opportunity to talk to your kids' teachers or your counselors, asking the school for some language for how to ask questions about the day is helpful. So, whereas a third grader, if you ask a third grader, hey, how was school today? They might talk to you for half an hour about how was school today. If you ask a 14-year-old, how was school today? I guarantee you they will say fine. When you say, what did you learn today? I guarantee you they will say either nothing or one thing, but if you ask the question the right way, more open-ended, tell me about something that you're working on in this class, or what happened today with Mr. So-and-so's class, if you happen to know that's a teacher they're fond of, you'll get them to open up, and it's in there. So take that rough exterior with a grain of salt and know that they're still the same child that you always had and still care. They want to know that you care.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. And I'm already seeing that towards the end of 5th grade. And one thing I'd just like to share, the one thing that I've kind of figured out over the last year or so with my son, because he's getting into that thing, nothing, what did you do? Nothing. I always ask them, how was your day? And they say good. I'm like, was it good or great? And sometimes they'll say great, sometimes they'll say good. And then I'm like, okay, so what made it great? And then they're forced to think about the one thing that made, day different from the other days. So you're absolutely right. It's about kind of probing in with a little bit of creativity. So.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think Paul Hemnett's ideas that he just put into the chat are awesome. A couple of years ago, we had one of those parent universities that the district does for the families. And I went to one of them, and the advice that that gentleman had given is something that just really stuck with me that I'll share here is he said we were talking about this very thing. You ask your kids, how was your day? And they say, fine. And you say, what did you learn today? What did you do today? And they say nothing. Then you know that's inaccurate. And he said to say to your kids, tell me 3 things, not tell me 3 things about your day, or tell me 3 things about math, or tell me 3 things about soccer, but just tell me 3 things. And every once in a while, they, might say, social studies was great because Mr. and Mrs. such and such, they did this cool thing. And if they showed it to me and I really liked it, or they might say, I was feeling really down today because this is what happened. Or they might say, I did something really nice for a friend today. And it just makes it really, really open-ended. I do it with my own daughter. She's in kindergarten, so she's very much still at the point where she wants to tell me every detail of her day, sometimes in excruciating detail. But I know that is short-lived, and that will not go on much longer than probably this school year. So I've been starting to do that with her. Just tell me 3 things, and every once in a while, I'll get it to open up a little bit. So just another one to try that stuck with me from Parent University 4 or 5 years ago.
And if you get them in the car for a little bit, the car is the best time when they talk because they're trapped. They can't jump out of a moving car. Piggybacking off of something Lamont said about middle school being almost like a transition to high school where you kind of practice getting the grades and things like that. Is there an emphasis on learning study skills and note taking? Because that's the one thing I keep asking my son. And I think my older one, and I think with the pandemic, everything ending up being on the Chromebook, the art of writing something down, like on the first day of middle school in CMS, I got him a 5-subject notebook. I put each subject in each tab and I put a date. And I said, every day, just write something that the teacher said, because I want him to learn more than the grades right now. I want him to learn the skills that he's going to need for high school or college in just writing things down. What are ways that we can encourage that, and how does the school encourage that? Thank you so much.
Go ahead, Kyle.
I was going to say, I think we go through a variety of learning modes with kids. And I do think that this is also a time to figure out like what works for you. I'm someone who I write things down. I have, and my assistant principals will tell you and joke with you that I have very long to-do lists, multiple of them, but that's what keeps me organized. I know that that's not the case for everybody. Some folks use different tools. Some folks just have a natural ability to keep themselves together. I was never actually a very good note taker despite that, right? I do think one of the nice things is that because our children at the middle school and really across the secondary level are exposed to so many different content areas that are taught by individual teachers, is that they get to learn a variety of different kind of like media and modality for them to use in their learning. And so I think some of it kind of comes off of the conversation we were just having, is talking to your child about what works for them and what doesn't. Some of our students write down their homework and agenda. Others use Google Keep. Others are using their calendar. Others just make it a habit of going home and checking every single Google Classroom when they get home and making sure that they have it right. There is no necessarily right or wrong answer, but I think our students are exposed to a number of different ways to engage in learning, to engage in the process of content and skill acquisition, to keep themselves organized, right? Work through study skills or executive functioning type skills. And it's a little bit of a messy process to start until students land on that. And I think I'll go back to all of the things we've said. If they're struggling somewhere, be with the teacher. Or if it's a global thing, they're kind of struggling everywhere, let's get counselor and case manager involved. Let's see if we need to look at the problem a little bit differently, or in some cases, pull back on that student taking the reins and running with them and say, okay, let's establish some routines for you. So I think it does look a little bit different from child to child. And I think that that's okay. Because I think, again, this is an opportunity to get exposed to all of those different things and find out, what are my strengths? What are the areas perhaps that I need to work on? And then once I know that, I can figure out, hey, how do I work on those things and work with my teachers and my staff and my home to make sure I'm following through as a student. So I think that's, I know, a global answer, but I think it is probably the fairest one to give.
Thank you.
And yes, Mr. Tulp, I write in all caps. Thanks a lot.
I'm just curious, and a bit off topic, but I feel like there was some research that said if you write something, you retain more, or maybe it was just my belief. Have things changed? Is there any new research that says, because obviously everything is changing, there's less writing everywhere. Have you guys come across anything that instills confidence that even if they're not writing, they're still retaining?
I don't think there's a class I've been to where they're not writing.
Okay.
And I think that that's how I'd answer that. They're writing in mathematics, probably more than ever before. They are definitely writing in their integrated reading and language arts classes, because that is one of the two core components of that experience. They're writing in their social studies classes, and they're writing in their science classes.
But do you mean handwriting versus typing?
Sure, both.
Okay.
A combination of both. And I think what has been really nice about getting back is that our teachers now have been able to get both sides of this, have been able to see what functions really well in a digital setting versus what works in a more analog sense, so that we can choose the best tool and method based on what we know kids need and how we've seen them navigate school remotely, in a blended manner, and now back in person. So I do think that there is a blend. Research still says that mind physical connection, right, is there. That research hasn't necessarily changed. I think that that's well grounded, and I think that that's why we try to take a relatively blended approach throughout all of our courses.
I think it's also really important to consider the way learning looks nowadays. So, for example, and I'll admit I'm not aware of any current, necessarily research on this particular topic, but to just ground it in sort of our everyday experience, when learning might have centered more around the retention of discrete pieces of information, memorizing things and kind of cataloging facts in our minds, I could see why, handwriting it in a more physical, kind of tactile way might help that sink in. But honestly, and while that is still an element of what our students are learning, of course, there's always going to be a need for that to learn facts and skills and things that are more concrete. However, there's such an emphasis, especially in middle school, on learning as not so much taking in and retaining information, but synthesizing information and then producing knowledge. It used to be here, I'm the teacher, I possess the knowledge, I'm giving it to you, it's your job to remember it. And nowadays, a lot of what happens in school is, as a student, you're given some information and your job is to now produce new information. It's to create a product, to create a comparison, to write and from a novel perspective, as opposed to something more formulaic. So, and I think that sort of aligns with Mr. Shim's point that the answer is yes. And, there are times when handwriting physically makes more sense. There are times when doing things digitally makes more sense. And it's about the product, and as opposed to the method of getting there.
Great thoughts. Thank you.
Hey guys, I just want to say that we are almost on the time. We have 4 minutes left. So maybe we can take a last question before we wrap up.
If no one has a last question, I could just jump in and say one more thing. I know many parents during that transition from 5th to 6th grade give their child a cell phone as a gift. I know that's sort of the norm. You sort of say, here's your cell phone. Congratulations and welcome to middle school. Just because the kids is a little bit more independent and you need to figure out ways to communicate with them. Those of you who saw the presentation for our orientation, I sort of took some time just to say to parents, yes, that's fine to give your child a cell phone, but you own it, you still pay the bill, and you should really manage what sites they go to and what social media platforms they go to. So as your child's transition from 5th grade to 6th grade, just don't give them the cell phone. You really have as a parent to stay on top of the sites that they're visiting in the social media piece. Goes back to my original point. I think one of the first points I made with trying to get students to be able to communicate differently and interact with other students. What we did see this year, students were behind the screen for the last 2 years. So they started saying things in person that they only said via text or on some social media platform. And so as administrators at the middle level, a lot of what we deal with is created on social media platforms. And in speaking to many parents, you see the head nodding, and speaking with many parents, they're completely unaware that their child is actually on that social media platform. And so you do have to try your very best to manage what sites they have access to and what sites they are logging on to. I will remind parents when we meet again in August of that piece, because it definitely is becoming more and more of situations where kids will find themselves in trouble.
And you'll hear from us. We really are, and again, we'll reiterate this in August and September, and I'm sure again in December, and then I'm sure again in January, and then in March, and then again in June, like we always have to. But it's this idea of appropriate use of the technology. We get it. It's on all of our hips. It's in front of me right now. Totally get it. But at the same time, we're adults, and I think we have figured out how to get into the working world. They're not there yet. And they certainly are not fully developed to be able to handle everything that they have access to now in their pockets. So they don't need it. If they do have it, they need to use it appropriately and within the bounds that we have set for them. And if they don't, there have been times where you will have to come and get said phone, and we will have those conversations. So it is worth the conversation. I know we're running out of time, but we've talked a lot about the transition, talked a lot about the school experience and things like that. Please also know the middle school is going to be a great opportunity for your children to get involved in co-curricular and extracurricular activities. That does include our interscholastic sports program. Those are all going to be new doors in a lot of cases that are opening up to them to explore their interests or to find out new things that they may be interested in. We post a lot of information to daily announcements. We have newsletters every week, but I understand everyone's lives are busy. Speaking of self-advocacy, we do news programs in the morning. We post announcements. We use Google Classrooms. If your children are interested in those things, they need to be ready to go find those resources and pay close attention to those announcements so that they know where to be and when, and how to register, and et cetera, et cetera. So please do the same, keep up, try to keep up. I know it's a big district, so you get a lot of information. COVID especially, we message families more often than not now. You're getting something from us almost every day. So we understand that sometimes volume means you're missing things, and that's okay, but it's also a great opportunity for kids to get involved and develop different and new social groups and interests. So they will learn more about that. You will learn more about that, but it didn't come up today, and I just wanted to make sure you know that there's after school clubs, there's extracurricular activities, there's competitive teams, there's non-competitive teams, there's a fall and a spring for many of them. So if they miss out in the fall, they can do it again in the spring. We really do. And I think, I won't speak for GMS because I'm not 100% sure, but I'm probably sure that they've done this too. We at CMS have consistently, if a child has wanted to do something after school, we have found them a seat to do something after school across their time in the middle school. So if they're interested and they want to get involved, they can get involved, and we encourage them to do that. But life's a balance, so make sure you're having those conversations with your kids. I only brought it up because the cell phone piece is a part of that. If they're staying after school, yes, we have late buses, but please be in touch with them about their plans after school, because we don't always know, especially on the 4:15 and 5:30 buses, they're supervised, but after that, once they're in the neighborhood, if they didn't quite get home, the main office is closed. So make sure you are having conversations and drawing up those boundaries for their participation after school so that they're meeting your expectations at home as well. Anyway, thank you for the time. Just wanted to make sure we pitched that.
If I can just throw in an ending note, I know we're over time, but transitioning to middle school really is an incredibly exciting experience for the kids. They are so excited. The funny thing sort of is that, as Mr. Tolt mentioned, at the end of the year, they ask the middle school kids questions. The two questions that come up most often every single time is, what if I can't get into my locker? And what if I get lost? those are predominantly the two concerns and worries that our kids have, at least here at Village, and I could probably say the same about Millstone. Everything else is the most exciting thing in the world to them, that they get to go to middle school and it's a bigger school and they get to change classes and they get all these after school activities that they aren't able to get involved with at this level because they don't exist. So my best advice as the summer starts to approach is, even if you as parents have anxieties and worries and fears about middle school, because we all do, and many of us are parents on this call, my kids are way too young to be worried about middle school, but I completely understand. Just always try to frame it in the most positive, exciting way, even if you're sort of internally struggling a little bit with some of your fears and anxieties with your kids moving and making that transition to a much bigger school. The same thing we had expressed to parents when they were coming back to school this year after the two very interesting years of the pandemic. If we can just frame it for kids that it's going to be okay, and if it's not, we're going to be there for you, because if we talk so much about our anxieties and our worries, they feel that and they grasp that. So if we can always just try to frame it in a positive way, I think they'll all have a really great transition. And we'll do the best that we can here to make sure that that happens here at Village. And I know our teachers are doing the same and just getting them really excited for that next step in their little school careers.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. And just wanted to let you know our next coffee with the principal session. We are inviting our speakers will be the athletic directors. So they will talk about like some cool stuff that's going on as well. So again, thank you, everyone. And I'm going to save the recording and I'll post it to YouTube and share the link very soon. Have a wonderful day. Bye.
Thanks for having us.
Take care, everyone.